then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell to his feet and begged him repeatedly.
My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her. She may be healed. She shall live.
Take me to your home.
So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from bleeding for 12 years. She had endured much under many different doctors, and she had spent all the money she had had. But she did not grow better, but worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease.
Who touched my clothes?
Thou seest the multitude thronging thee.
Immediately aware the power
Sayest
had
thou,
gone
"Who touched
forth
me?"
from him, Jesus turned about the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling.
I have suffered an issue of blood for 12 years. And I knew if I could just touch thy clothes, that I would be whole.
He said,
Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague.
While Jesus was speaking, some of the people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?"
Why make ye this ado and weep? She is not dead, but sleepeth. Leave this house. Talitha Kumai. Arise. Tell no man what was done in this house this day. Let her be given something to eat.
Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to week 6 of Transformations, the Lent edition. And this week is Holy Week, my friends, and so we are getting into the thick of it. Today is Wednesday, but tomorrow we have Maundy, Thursday, we have Good Friday when Jesus died on the cross, and then Sunday is Easter when Jesus rose from the dead. Cool stuff, y'all. But now we're going to look into this passage from Mark, and what we see going on here is kind of two different stories weaved into each other. First, we have the man Jairus, who is a leader in the church or the synagogue for the Jewish people. He was powerful and known to people, and one thing that was really common is if there was an issue or a complaint or a request, that the man leader of the family would go and make that request in public. Jairus does that. He kneels down on the ground and begs Jesus for help for his dying daughter. And then we see all of a sudden this other story comes into play, and there's this woman who's been bleeding for like 12 years, and she's in pain, and none of the doctors who have seen have been able to help her at all. She spent all of her money trying to figure out how to heal herself, but she has faith that Jesus can do it, that just with one touch, with one grasp of Jesus' clothes, she knows that she'll be healed. So she reaches out, she grabs his clothes, and Jesus feels this power leave him. He feels him sharing this power with somebody, but he doesn't know what's going on at the moment. He looks around, he's like, whoa, who touched me? Who touched me? And she's like kind of freaked out because she knows that it's not appropriate for her to touch another person, a man, or really even be out in public. Back then, with the Jewish purity laws, they were expected to be clean at all times. And so if she was bleeding, she was not clean in their eyes. She wasn't even supposed to be in public, and yet she's in the crowd, and she grabs Jesus and touches him, and Jesus feels this connection. The word in Mark that's used for what she does is touch. She touches his fabric. But what we see when we look at the Greek word, the original words, is that the touch word means more something like to fasten onto. It wasn't just a stroke of the cloth. She really believed that he was gonna heal her, and so she kind of grabbed on. She fastens herself to him. She is sort of attaching herself to Jesus. And she knew she had been healed. And it wasn't just like this brain knowing where she could sort of understand wow, okay, I'm not bleeding anymore. It was like this sense of being, like something filled her spirit and made her feel alive again. There was something about her body that just changed, and she felt so completely different and healed. And for this reason, for this shock of her body coming alive, she falls down on the ground just like Jairus had done and pleads for her case. Now, Jairus' little daughter had this man, her father, to speak up for her and that was appropriate in that day. But for a woman to be speaking on behalf of herself, to be asking Jesus for something, and for her to be unclean while doing it, that was just mind-blowing. And at that, Jesus calls her daughter. And when we look at the rest of the Gospels, this is the only place that Jesus does this, is call someone daughter. Jesus becomes this advocate for this woman who has no one else to speak for her. Of course, the 12-year-old girl had her dad, and he was able to speak loud and proud and ask for some help, but she wasn't really allowed to do that, and so Jesus became her advocate. He was on her side, and he was ready to defend her and heal her and help her. And then, in the meantime, so Jesus goes to this house of Jairus and looks for this girl who they say is dying, and people are like, okay, don't bother Jesus because this girl is a lost cause. She is dead as dead as dead. But then Jesus says, do not be afraid. Have faith. In the same way that this woman had so much faith that she thought that even just grasping onto Jesus for a moment would cure her, Jesus was saying, guys, you gotta have faith like this woman because, man, it healed her and it'll heal your daughter. And so a couple things we can see from this, my friends, is that Jesus actively rebelled against the purity codes or the clean codes for the Jewish culture in that time. First, he touched an unclean woman who's bleeding. And second, he touched a woman who had died, and so she was also considered unclean. Jesus, 1, 2, boom, broke the rules twice for the sake of saving people and for encouraging and supporting and lifting up their faith. One thing that we can see, my friends, throughout this story of Mark is that we see, obviously, that women weren't considered to be equal to men. First, Jairus had to speak on behalf of his young daughter. Okay, yeah, she was dead. But also, it was appropriate for men to be the ones to say things out loud on behalf of the family. And this is not actually a big surprise because throughout of history, even now, women get the short end of the stick, meaning women aren't treated as well. Women aren't treated equally. Let's fast forward to Martin Luther's day. So this is around 1525. So this is about 1,500 years after Jesus had died. And so Luther is doing his thing. He's rebelling against the church. He's saying, look, God is about grace and love, and God doesn't require you to do all these acts to make it into heaven. And that's what the Catholics were saying at that time. They were saying that there were all these rules that it took for you to be worthy enough. But Martin Luther was like, no, bro. No. God's got you. So Martin Luther was a radical for his day. And another reason he was radical and that way he was sort of pushing the limit was because he respected his wife, Katie, as an equal to him. Women were not allowed to like own businesses. They weren't allowed to lead. They weren't allowed to like really speak up in public and stuff. And Martin Luther was like this advocate saying that women should have an equal voice and an equal place in the church and in life. Martin Luther even supported Katie as she like opened her own business, her own bar basically, where they brewed all this beer. And he was like proud of her and he was like, my wife, she makes the littest beer in all the world. He was so supportive of her because he knew that God was in support of making everyone equal. He wanted everyone to be equally valued and dignified and loved. And so he lived into that in his own relationship with his wife. And my friends, this applies like all across the board. It's not just about like gender equality between men and women. What God has in mind is that we rewrite, that we like destroy, get rid of the systems that keep people down. And the people that are being kept down are black and brown and poor and have disabilities and are queer or transgender or genderqueer. There are all these groups of people that are not benefiting from the way that our culture works. Our society seems to decide who is worthy and who is not worthy, and that's exactly what God wants to fight against. He wants us to fight against. He wants us to be advocates along with him, knowing that freedom for our brothers and sisters and siblings is so important that if they are not free, then none of us are free. God comes to save all of us, to rewrite the way that we interact with each other, the way that we treat each other on all these levels, from me to you, but from government to person, from community to person, the way that we treat each other, the way that we live into what society tells us is right. God has come to rewrite and tell us there's a new way. There's a different way, and we don't have to feel boggled down by these pressures to fit in, because there's a new world that God has in mind for us, where every single person is equally valued and loved and cherished for all their differences. The lesson here, y'all, is that when we have faith in God, and we have faith in God's vision and God's plans for the world, amazing things can happen. We feel confident, we feel moved to be advocates and stand up for each other, to stand up for people who get the short end of the stick. And y'all, this is what church is all about. We can acknowledge that we need God. We need each other. As Christians, we can create a place where we can own our vulnerability. We can share our hopes and dreams, our fears and disappointments. And so together we can hear God's amazing vision, God's amazing plans that have to do with his unfailing acceptance and his total love and mercy and wanting us to live into a world where we can be free. That is my devotion for us, my friends. It's been a pleasure. And let's talk. Peace and love.